Back at it again, as Cody would say. I'm not really good at that, but hey, Cody's not here. I'll go with what I got. Welcome back to another episode of Shades of Blue Soccer Show video version. Since I have a better microphone now, hopefully it's working. You can hear me, Mike?
It is. I can
Okay.
hear you.
All right, we're gonna try to do some of these like every so often, like quick hitters, multiple times a week. I know we'll probably do some quick hit pods also. Um, One of the big pieces of news in the last couple of days was actually, obviously the postponement of Sporting's game at Colorado, initially for one player and two coaches, I believe, or two staff. We don't want to
Yeah.
say coaches, two staff members. That could be PR, it could be kitmen or trainers or
The
whatever.
people that had some sort of interaction with the players, I think, is kind
Yeah.
of how they were defining the staff portion of that. Is, if I remember right, how they were doing it.
And then, well, and the only reason I say some of that is because, like, I know Sporting has pretty much locked down the environment at Compass Minerals Training Center. If I brainwash myself enough, I can say that at Pinnacle. But there's like two PR guys that can interact with them, and two PR guys that don't. So it is very much somebody who interacts with them, and even like staff members are not. Some are, some aren't. So. But since then, the news was one more player and seven more staff members.
That's what MLS came out with today, basically, as we were recording this Monday night. One more player and seven more staff members received positive tests. So at this point, their game next weekend is now, this coming weekend, I guess, is now in question against Portland.
I would say very much in question. Because, you probably got to wait for at least a few more days of people being negative before you would let them even train together again, right? With that many happening in one spot.
Yeah, no, their release said that they shut down their training complex on the 24th, so 4 days ago, as of this recording. So in that instance, you quarantine for 10 days, you're looking at least probably the fourth or fifth before you would consider even getting back into the training facility, or at least to the point where those players would reach the minimum quarantine period, which was 10 days. If you go further than that, you're going to the 8th of October, and then I don't have the Rapid schedule memorized, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were scheduled to have a game on the 7th and then again on the 10th or 11th, basically. So you're really going to start getting into some tight scheduling situations if the situation requires more postponements.
Yeah, it doesn't really bode well for them at this point, does it? Because they're probably going to have to be playing like every 3 days for 25 days straight or something.
Well, I looked at it when the rest of the schedule came out, and basically for Sporting, for example, from the first game of this phase, the return home phase, I guess if you want to call it that started on in August through through decision day, it's like 79 days, and they're playing 18 games, I think it is. Basically, it averaged out to a game every just over 4 days. So it's already a tight schedule as it is.
Yep.
And now what's going to happen is Sporting's going to have a game crammed in. I think there's like 1 week where they don't have a midweek game or two weeks where they don't have a midweek game. And one of those 2 weeks is going to get the Rapids game crammed in there. And for the Rapids, the other one, they're probably going to get a game against Portland crammed in there. So anymore, and I don't know where you schedule the games at, because you're playing. After like this weekend or so, most teams are playing 2 games a day from till November, basically.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy to reschedule that stuff. They might end up having to take a couple forfeits, which then benefits other teams unfairly. But this season is if you make the playoffs, it's just a victory at this point.
No, yeah, it's in a sense it is it sucks. In another sense, if you look at the standings, it's actually a fairly exciting run up to the end of the season right now.
Yep.
With regards to MLS, because I mean the it is tight. I mean, Sporting is sitting on 20 points in third place in the West right now, and San Jose is sitting on like 14, and they're at the bottom of the West right now.
And that's
So,
almost
I mean,
unbelievable how horrible they've been.
yeah, I mean because they won against LAFC Sunday night, and since then, or before that, they'd had basically gotten 3 points in their prior games since they returned home. And in the 3 games that they didn't tie, they got absolutely destroyed, like 7-1, 6-0, 5-1, something like that in all those games. And yet, as of right now, they're only 4 points out of the playoffs. It, it's it, it it's frustrating, the situation, but it's making for a very tight and potentially entertaining final run of the season.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think in the last 2 weeks of the season, you could see a team go from top four to out of the playoffs just by having a bad run. If LAFC ever actually gets going, maybe they could do something. It's just, I mean, I just look at the standings also, and I'm like, as bad as LAFC's been, I was actually surprised they were as high as they are.
Yeah, they're in a playoff spot right now. So
Yeah.
I mean, it is a very tight Western Conference. I mean, yeah, you got Seattle and Portland who have kind of pulled away on 24. You got Sporting and Dallas on 20, Colorado and Minnesota on 19, LAFC, Salt Lake on 18, and then you got Houston at 16, Vancouver and LA at 15, and then San Jose at 14. So you have 10 points separating 12th from first right now, with anywhere from 9 to 10 games left in the season for these teams.
Yeah.
So it should be fun to it should be exciting and fun to watch.
Yeah, the East is not quite so packed. I mean, you have Miami and DC in 13th and 14th with 11 points, and Columbus with 30, and Philadelphia with 28. So there's a little more separation there.
They're also getting 2 more teams into the playoffs than the West is, though.
Yeah, true.
So they
They're four.
there's
They're 4 points out. The bottom one, yeah.
yeah. So I mean DC in 14th in the West is no further back than San Jose is in the or DC in the East is no further back than San Jose is in the West. So
Yeah.
it's I mean it should, in theory, it should be a lot of fun. But speaking of DC, I don't know if you saw Goff's comment. Apparently, Olsen's seat is actually very hot for once. It's only taken 5 extra years than it would at most teams to get a hot seat. But where I'm bringing this back around to Sporting at is when I saw that, I got curious to see. So Vermes, as we all know, is the most tenured head coach in MLS. He's
Yep.
been at Sporting longer than any other coach in the league has been with their
And then
current
Olsen
team.
second.
Olsen's second. So what I was curious about is how big of a gap would it be if Olsen gets fired? How big of a tenure gap is there between Vermes and third place on the list?
Okay, so Vermes
First,
is
who do you think is third on the list?
Minnesota.
Minnesota hasn't been in the league that long.
No, I know, but um, I'm just trying to run down the line of what coaches have been there for Philadelphia.
That is it. It is
Yeah.
Jim Curtin in Philadelphia.
How long has he been there?
Jim Curtin has been there since 2014. So basically, there would be a 5-year gap between Vermes and the next most tenured coach if Ben Olsen gets fired by DC United, as he probably should have a couple times over by now. But yeah, it according to what I'm looking at, Curtin was hired June 10th of 2014. So almost about 4 years and 10 months after Vermes was hired by the Wizards at that time to be the interim coach after they fired Anolfo.
Yep. And I'm actually surprised Curtin lasted the first 3 years. I mean, he had some good and some bad, though. I mean,
Well, Philly has also had close to the similar issues with DC in terms of keeping people and staff around when other clubs would have probably looked to have cut ties by that point. But credit to them, it's paying off for them. They fully went behind the "play your kids" mantra, and it's after some growing pains, it's paying off for them. They've looked really good this season.
yeah, Aronson and McKenzie especially. No doubt. I want to swing back to the whole COVID situation for just a second. We talked about how it's going to throw the schedule completely into crap. But when the last player for Sporting was announced as having it, we'd actually asked Vermes about it at one point during a presser. And he said if everything goes perfectly fine, best it can, it should be approximately 18 days from when they first have it to when they get out, when they're released to come back to the team, if everything goes perfectly. And that's if they're asymptomatic, but they've just tested positive, because they have to quarantine for 10 days. And then they go through 8 days of testing, including an EKG, an echocardiogram, and they have to get cleared by the senior medical officer in that whole process, because they want to make sure it's not harming anything, that no hidden issues, nothing like that. So I went back and checked if that's the case from the day that Shalhoub, if he was the one they announced originally, we're assuming he was, since he said it.
Based off his Instagram post, which we
Right.
didn't mention, but yes, Daniel Shalhoub said on Instagram that he had said he was glad to be back and goodbye COVID, which
Right. So
reading that, it would imply that he was the one that tested positive.
Yeah, because I know we both tried to not speculate when we didn't know who it was. It could have been one of a couple or 3 players, and we didn't try to pin that because that's none of our business at that point. But once he kind of announced it, we're going to go with believing him for the moment. But it would have went back to like 2 days after the game in Houston that he would have tested positive, if that was the case, and following the timeline and all that stuff. So anyway, kind of interesting.
So in that case, if they're going by 18 days,
Well, that's Sporting.
I would in turn assume that in theory all MLS teams would be following a similar protocol. Basically,
You would hope they would all be following a similar protocol.
Yes.
I have, considering some players fly into new countries and play shortly after they arrive, but that's also like a Florida man situation. So
yes. For those of you that don't know, there were reports that Higuain for Inter Miami left the country to get his visa and came back, did not quarantine, and then proceeded to play in Inter Miami's game against Philadelphia over the weekend. So that is what we are referring to if you missed that news.
and it did help his penalty shooting.
Yes, yeah.
He attended the Eddie Johnson School of Penalties while he was over.
The Philadelphia response, I don't know if you have ever saw the highlights of it, but do you remember years ago, this sounds crazy now, but during the Invincibles Arsenal run where Man United had a chance to end it against them, and Van Nistelrooy had a late penalty kick and he missed it, and James will butcher me for not remembering who it was, but one of the guy for Arsenal just got in Van Nistelrooy's face after that, and that's a carbon copy of what happened in Philadelphia that night. Was their players basically just mobbed Higuain to get in his face after he missed it. It was comedic almost.
I don't know who it was, but the one guy went running in there, did the whole jump in the air and the fist thing.
I think that was
celebrated
Elliott.
goal.
I think I think that was Elliot, but don't quote me on that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't know, but I mean that was the what part that I thought was the funniest. I mean, like kind of getting in his face and saying "ha ha," I can get that a little bit, but I mean he just did that like he just scored the game winning goal
yeah,
himself, and
yeah.
he
It was while it was humorous, it did seem to come off as a little much in that situation. A little
oh
much.
a lot, a lot. I mean, it's like other sports, like the guy who did not intercept the ball and run it back for the touchdown, jumping up and down, like he was the guy who just won the Super Bowl. Like I don't know.
Or the guy that forced a turnover with 6 minutes left in the game and celebrate that you're up 10 with 6 minutes left in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that kind of happens. Um, we could probably run through down a whole list of those, couldn't we?
Uh-huh, probably, but uh, trying to keep this on soccer and current events in soccer, basically.
Yeah, this football, not that football. All
Um,
right. Was there? Let's see. I know we'd mentioned also the Gold Cup. This is
yep,
something that just came out actually, like just as we're getting ready to start this. U.S. is in Group B with Canada, Martinique, and the preliminary winner number 7.
which I don't remember who all's in the group, but I believe Haiti is the favorite of that. I believe it's like Haiti. Oh, I'm gonna not remember who else it is, but I think one of the other ones is St. Kitts, or maybe
Yeah,
St. Vincent. Maybe it's St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Um,
I know one of those is doing really well.
yeah,
I forget which one
it's
it is.
Haiti. Haiti. I remember seeing it was Haiti was the favorite of the preliminary group, but I don't remember who all is also in their preliminary group, basically. But uh,
The weird thing is, I looked up there and I went, "Why the hell is Qatar in Group D?" And I went, "Oh yeah,
we're going back to the guest players, to the
yes,
guest teams, the guest teams being in the tournament, basically. So, oh, Haiti, St. Vincent, Bermuda, and Barbados. So, yeah, Haiti's the favorite in that one,
yeah."
easily the favorite. So,
Which, if they win, they would be the one in Group B with U.S. U.S. should
but
still be able to handle Canada, Martinique, and
it
whichever one
should
it
be,
is.
but it'll be Canada is. I don't know if I'm starting to drink the Kool-Aid that I'm seeing from some other people around, but Canada with on a talent level, they seem to scare me a little bit. That with some of the talent that they have on their team right now, they are developing enough that they are starting to scare me, basically. And when you have a player like Davies, who is one of the more expensive players in the world now,
Yeah,
which in and
amazing.
of itself also seems surprising. It, it's yeah, I'm not sure what to expect, and again, I'm not sure if I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but it does scare me a little bit. Now, at the same time, while they have Davies and they have oh what's his name? I can't think of his name. He just
Thomas,
moved
was it
to
Thomas?
David, Jonathan David just moved to
Yeah,
Lille. Um,
I knew it was like a name like that. Yeah,
yeah, but while they have the attacking options, I think they still aren't that good defensively, from what I remember. Um, Not to fault a player who I personally liked, Amir Yiddich, but he was called into their last camp,
yeah,
and he got his first national team caps this year. So
yeah. He's been in like 2 of the last 3, I think.
yeah, he he. I think attacking wise, they're really starting to scare me. But as you look at it, I think defensively, they is where the problem may be for them. But it's it's good that they're becoming more competitive, and it'll be fun to see. But Canada does scare me more than if you'd have asked me this a year or two ago, I guess.
At that point, the scarier team would have been the women's team from Canada than the men's team.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to be making a sexist issue of it, but yeah, it would have been the women's team would have been much more scary because they were good. Um, let's see, we got anything else to chat about tonight, Mike?
Uh,
Wasn't
Only
there?
other thing, Sporting KC2, second to last game of the season, is this Wednesday
Right?
against Indy.
Yeah,
Going
I
back
just
on the road
posted
again.
Just posted Nathan's preview of it a little while ago.
Yeah, that's what reminded me of it. So, it'll be. I want, while it's frustrating, I want to, and while while it's frustrating, and I know it sounds like I'm just placating to the team in this, I do have to verbally, instead of just on Twitter, say how impressive the job Nagamura has done this season with Sporting, with Sporting KC2. They were put in a very strong group. I think.
One of the
Yeah.
top two toughest, I'd say, groups.
Oh yeah. No, definitely one of the two toughest. And I think there's only one group where the fourth place team has more points than Sporting does currently as another fourth place team, and that's a 5-team group where I believe the last place team is, I want to say it's the West team with like San Diego, Los Dos, Orange County, Phoenix, and Vegas in it. I think that group, and I think Vegas is the one that is just
Terrible.
dragging at the very bottom. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in a 4-team group where you're playing Indy and Louisville and St. Louis, I got to commend the job that Nagamura has done with an incredibly young team. And at the same time, also give credit to the likes of Christian Duke and Dylan Cerna for the leadership on the field that they've done this year. While it sounds horrible saying it for a team that's in last place in their division, but I came into the season with zero expectation for the team, with not much, just get the kids out there, let them play, let them develop, see which ones can potentially move up at some point. And to see them competing, their last game against Austin aside, they've done very well. They've been in every game.
They've knocked off teams on the road because they've had to do it on the road since they only had 2 home games. That's the other thing I don't think you mentioned is just 2 home games.
Yeah.
They knocked off teams like for the first time, Louisville, Indy. I think that was like their first losses this year to Sporting. Doing it with such young kids, doing it with a rotating lineup, doing it with not a lot of depth on the back line. A couple of those guys were
doing it without any loans from Sporting, which is, I mean, let's face it, that's the backbone of the Sporting KC2 teams a lot over the years have been the loans of like the Graham Smiths, the Felipe Hernandezes, the Juan Cusains. Those have been the backbone of Sporting KC2, and they've only got Tyler Freeman, and then
Pulskamp has come down for a couple.
Has done a couple of the St. Louis trips, and then he did the one other home game that they got. So otherwise, they've done it on their own, which again speaks to the job that Nagamura has done this year.
Yeah, lots of credit to all those guys, and I think several of them have made big leaps to have serious looks from the first team for potential homegrown contracts. Quite honestly, there's times I wouldn't have minded them pulling up Cerna to the first team.
I'm sorry, I'm going all technicality here. I don't think you could have called up Cerna.
No,
the youth loan, the loans from the championship team, they have to be, I think it's under 25, isn't it?
Yeah,
I don't.
No,
yeah,
you're right.
I know what you're saying, but yeah,
they would have to sign him to pull him up.
Yeah,
but,
no, I mean, as you said, there are guys that have proven that they need to get looks. I mean, Harris was in with the team at preseason this past year. He should very much get another look this offseason if he's not signed before preseason next year. Rad,
Jake Davis.
Yep, Jake Davis. Rad was again in preseason with Sporting this year in Arizona before joining Sporting KC2. Jake Davis is another one. I believe I'd have to actually pull up my stats on my other computer, but I believe Jake Davis now leads the team in minutes played this year. For Sporting.
Probably.
So, I mean, those three specifically, absolutely. I'll be disappointed and honestly surprised if all three aren't in preseason with Sporting KC, with the first team to at least start next year. I'll be surprised if they aren't.
Yeah, let's at least hope they are. My only concern with Harris is a little bit of speed. He's not exactly the fastest guy, but when he's on the ball, he's hard to knock off of it. Um, but if you
I
can play
mean,
the ball into him, he's good at finishing.
yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you don't. We make a big deal about needing speed or needing forwards, but needing forwards to have pace. But if a guy can finish, you can't teach that. I mean, that sounds cliche, but it's hard to just teach clinical finishing.
Very true. Plus, the way Sporting plays a lot of games, you don't need the speed because they have
You're,
possession of the ball.
it's a possession build-up style of
Yeah.
play, so you don't need the pace against that basically. And if you do need the pace, it's coming on your wings. So I would love to see all three of those kids be with the first team, and I would hope at least one would earn a homegrown contract before next season.
Hopefully.
Now, granted, some of that is also potentially dependent on what players stay and leave. Particularly one other homegrown midfielder who's on the roster currently. But yeah, I would hope that all three are in preseason, and I would hope that in the near future, one or all three are signed to first team contracts, because I think all three are deserving of at least showing that they've improved to that point where they deserve that shot.
Yeah, and if they haven't this far, they might one more year because this is Harris's second year as a pro, and Davis's and Rad's first year as a pro.
2.5 for Harris. He was under an academy contract, and so he played one or two games under an academy contract, and then signed or I don't know. He's on his second full year as a pro, if I remember right.
And this not even being a full year. So
yeah.
But yeah, I'm pretty confident they would have actually made the playoffs if they had regular home games and stuff like that.
If they could have actually spent a couple days at home and not have to come back and pack up and travel again.
Well, because they spent like almost 2 weeks on the road going to games because they didn't want to travel back because nobody wanted to travel. So it's crazy. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up unless there's some other breaking news that just popped up, which I'm not going to look at Twitter and find it. So
no, not going to do that right now. I'll do that after we get off, and I'll tweet it.
Yeah, of course you will. All right, thanks for joining, Mike. Hopefully we can get some more of these in, at least a couple a week, if not more. And anything else you got to say?
Nope.
Cool.
All good.
All right, man. Thanks. And I don't have a really cool sign off like, other people do. So that's all.